All right, thank you, Ethan. Now we're going to bring in our guest here, the Houstonian from Boston, Nick Veronesi.
Nice to see y'all again.
Nice to see you too, Nick. All right, so we're going to jump into our first topic. Roy Halladay died Tuesday, November 7th, in a small plane crash outside of Florida. So what did you guys think when you heard the news?
Just complete shock. He was definitely one of the better pitchers that I remember watching growing up. The one time I saw him was a Phillies game against Washington back in 2010. Shut out the Nationals, and Phillies hung on for a 1-0 victory. He was basically the definition of pure dominance in both Toronto and Philadelphia, the two teams he played.
He was very similar to what Clayton Kershaw is to the MLB today when he was in his prime.
Yeah, and you could just assume that he was going to have a big game, give up 1 run or less in 7 innings, and yeah, I think this hits baseball hard because there have been a lot of surprising deaths over the past few years, like Oscar Taveras, a prospect for the Cardinals, is one of them. But Roy Halladay, you have to think that he's going to be in the Hall of Fame within the next year or two.
Definitely.
And the fact that he won't be there is it's sad. It's really depressing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other deaths from pitchers like Ventura for the Royals and Taveras' situation.
Jose Fernandez.
Yeah, all of those deaths were caused by either drug or alcohol or something that they had done wrong. And this one just being a freak mishaps is devastating to the world of baseball. And the stats he had, an 8-time All-Star, one of the few pitchers in MLB history to win a Cy Young in the American and the National League, and a perfect game and a no-hitter in the postseason, which is wild. The career he had, I think he's definitely going to be a Hall of Famer, and he will be missed in the baseball world.
You know, I grew up watching Braves games with my dad, so I hated the Phillies. They kicked our butts for so many years, and there was nothing we could do with them, especially Roy Halladay. But even though I didn't like the Phillies, Roy Halladay was one of those guys that you wanted to pull for, even though he was on the team that you hated. He was just such a good guy, a great dad. He was always had a smile on his face to put a smile on yours. And my favorite memory of him was the playoff game against Cincinnati. I think it was the NLDS game 1 when he threw that no-hitter.
Yeah.
I've never wanted the Philadelphia Phillies to win a game in my life, but I was pulling for him to get that no-hitter that day because I just wanted to see him make history because he was just such a genuine guy.
The game that I saw him start, that was in the middle of Philadelphia's heyday, from 2008 when they won the World Series to 2011, where they were almost a lock to be the best team in the MLB. I would have liked to see Halladay get that World Series because he was on the team when they were at their prime, and they probably could have won the World Series. But overall, outstanding career. I'm without saying a bad word or anything, it's sad to see him go at such an early age.
Definitely was a great ambassador for baseball, and a lot of sports don't have those kind of people out there for them right now to make kids come in, people that everyone likes. We have a lot of polarizing figures in sports right now that you either love or love to hate, and Roy Halladay was one of those guys that about everybody would love.
It's a great segue into
Unless
the
you're
next
a Braves fan.
Yeah. So moving on from that somber note, we talked about the basketball season starting a little earlier, and when you talk about basketball, you got to talk about the royal family of basketball. So moving into that, LiAngelo Ball was arrested in China this week. He was arrested with his teammates Jalen Hill and Cody Riley for stealing sunglasses from a Louis Vuitton outside of his hotel room. What was he doing? What was he thinking?
It's wild, and as you were talking about with Roy Halladay, how great an influence he was. This is just not good for the Ball family and the school of UCLA. Having 3 players caught shoplifting, it's kind of a boneheaded move. Well, really a boneheaded move, especially when you're in the spotlight like LiAngelo Ball and the Ball family. So to do that, and now they were released on bails and face a 20-day house arrest in China, and then a ban from the country following, which is just outrageous.
And I just want to point something out really fast. The shoes that they're selling right now, the Ball family, the Big Baller brand, those sell for $495 a pair, and 1 pair of Louis Vuitton sunglasses is $495. So clearly we're not selling the shoes very well right now. Going through some financial troubles in the Ball family. I mean, you could at least his brother was just the 2nd overall pick in the NBA. Ask your brother for a check for some spending money in your trip to China or something. You don't need to steal the money or steal the sunglasses from the store.
It's one of those things where we've seen time and time again, young people entering the heyday of their years, they're becoming famous, and they just don't know how to handle it at such a young age. And for LiAngelo, I guess it backfired on him. Obviously, we would all hope that they can learn from this moving forward and become better human figures in the United States. But obviously not a good look for a family that knows a thing or two about becoming a highlight in SportsCenter.
Well, his name and his market definitely hurt him. Growing up in Los Angeles with the last name Ball, especially in the last few years, isn't going to make you feel better because they're not really held as accountable as most young college basketball players would be held. But even with that, you still got to think better, especially in China. Not exactly the best place to be running around and stealing things because they have very harsh penalties, especially before nationals. And I couldn't imagine UCLA didn't sit their kids down and say, all right, guys, not the best place to be stealing things.
You also have to keep in mind the three boys, they haven't done much in the spotlight before this. It's been LeVar that's been doing all the talking. I guess it's mostly been talking, but the kids, they've put together relatively decent reputations outside of their father. So this is not a good look for the three of them.
And Lamar and LaMelo, they're really the two biggest talents in the team, in the family. They were both of them were 5-star talents. LiAngelo was just a 3-star talent. I don't know how much of that was based off of his last name and things like that, but especially when you're going to be fighting for playing time and not necessarily starting, and that name's already going to be a detriment to you on the team. Doing things like this, there's no chance. Like, what is he doing? Okay, so now we're going to move on to even worse behavior by the pros. These guys ought to know what the heck they're talking about, what they're doing, because they've already grown up and grown into men, and they are being role models for children. The bad behavior in the NBA this year. We've had Kyrie yelling at fans, flipping them off, KD and Steph thrown out in the exact same game, with Steph throwing his mouthpiece at a referee. We've had the social media spats, Draymond attacking Mark Cuban, getting in a fight with him. LeBron's Instagram after the Cavs started 4-6, I think, and Kyrie going to the Celtics and starting 10-2, and him starting posting the Arthur meme. Bledsoe going on Twitter and saying that he didn't want to be in Phoenix anymore, pulling back and saying he was in a hair salon.
Yeah.
What's going on with the NBA players right now?
It's wild. And through 12 games this season, 118 NBA players have been fined and racked up a total of $800,000 in fines, which is unreal. We're 12 games into the season. Most notably the ones we just talked about, and the role model status that these players have, especially players like Kyrie and Steph, to do things like that, it's not a good look for the NBA. And in a social media age, going into Bledsoe's situation, you have to watch what you say on social media, and we've been talking about this for a while now, especially with younger athletes. And growing up, they need to learn.
Yeah, and Steph, especially a few years ago, he was the golden boy of the NBA. He was the baby face. Everyone loved him. He could do nothing wrong. He's really
moved from a small college.
Yeah, and he's moved really into that villain role kind of ever since Kevin Durant moved to Golden State. He's trying to flip his persona and what people think about him, and I don't know if it's a good look for him, honestly.
The two things that I want to point out is Bledsoe. For one, I don't think it was just his tweet. He may have been in a hair salon. He may not have been.
Nah, he wasn't in a hair salon. Don't try to cover for Eric Bledsoe.
Well, we don't know that for sure. But the point that
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
The problem is, Bledsoe was not helping the Phoenix Suns in any way. The team was horrible even while he was the starting point guard.
That's been since Charles Barkley left Phoenix. Really since, Steve Nash.
Yeah.
I'll give him the Steve Nash era. I forgot about that.
Yeah. The point is, he wasn't doing much to help the Suns anyway. They were one of the worst teams in the Western Conference year after year. So it was one of those things where they might as well get rid of someone who already was not exactly helping the team to begin with in his late 20s.
But he still was their starting point guard. So
He was
what
their
made that
starting
team
point
better.
guard, but they weren't getting anywhere. And now you've got, Devin Booker, he's the face of that backcourt for a long time. You've got Mike James, who has taken over for Bledsoe, and he's actually done really well, considering that he had been playing, I'm pretty sure he was playing overseas last year. So that's a
We've
big
seen
deal.
A lot of that lately.
And
Players coming back
of course,
from overseas.
you also have Tyler Ulis coming off the bench. He had a breakout, even though he was a second-round pick last year. So, yes, I think that tweet probably was not a good look for Bledsoe, but he may have been on his way out anyway, maybe at the trade deadline.
Well, hopefully this serves as an example for other players in the league that what they say on social media has consequences, and we've seen it frequently over the last 12 games this season and over the off season. So yeah, him getting shipped away because of what he said online is a big deal.
And we're what, a month into the season maybe? We've still
Not
got a
even.
long time to go. The finals don't end until July, so these guys really are just building a fire that could explode before the season even ends.
One thing we didn't even mention, we mentioned Draymond talking about owners changing their names for some odd reason. We didn't even bring up Draymond's fight with Bradley Beal, which partly was Beal's fault because he was the one that kind of wrapped the two up. But on top of that, of them getting fined, there were also players coming off the bench to enter the scuffle, even though they're well aware that they're going to get suspended if they come off the bench. C.J. McCollum did that.
Now, speaking of that, though, speaking of the suspensions, Adam Silver's been very light on the suspensions this year.
Yeah.
When Steph threw that mouthpiece at the referee, didn't get 1 game suspension.
No, he didn't.
If anyone else in the NBA, save LeBron James, James Harden, or a few other big names did that,
Russell Westbrook.
like if Kimball Walker was playing for the Hornets and threw his mouthpiece at the referee, he'd be out 10 games. He'd be out a long, extended period of time. The way that they protect these guys is what's really giving them the gall to be able to go out and do the things that they're doing right now, because I know there won't be any repercussions. They might lose 10 grand, which they make $40 million a year. Who cares? Whatever.
Well, maybe they'll increase the fines moving forward. Maybe it'll become like $100,000 for offenses that, like Beal and Green got, the 50,000, 25,000. Maybe that'll increase with the increasing salary.
Well, taking them out of
salaries they're
games
getting.
would help too, and they won't even do that.
Hopefully the